So when I'm at a party and I want to talk to someone about what I do, there's a very, very tiny percentage of the population that can talk with me. Whereas when I got into finance, now all of a sudden this is something that everyone deals with, right? So
Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of the Being an Engineer podcast. Today we have with us Stanley Leong, a former electrical engineer turned private wealth advisor, best-selling author, and financial advisor practice consultant. After earning his bachelor's and master's in electrical engineering from Cornell and working as an engineer at IBM and Agilent, Stanley transitioned into wealth management, where he now focuses on helping engineers, executives, and high-tech professionals think more strategically about money, risk, equity, compensation, retirement, and long-term financial decision-making. He's the author of Engineering Your Finances and brings a uniquely analytical, systems thinking approach to personal finance. Welcome to the show, Stanley.
great. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for having me.
So we were talking about this a little bit before we hit the record button, but I've been excited for this episode because I have done now I think over 350 of these Being an Engineer podcast interviews, and they've been wonderful. I've gotten to know so many exciting people, and I personally have learned so much. Nevertheless, if I'm being perfectly honest, I would like to start introducing some different topics, right?
Yeah.
Same old thing every time. Engineering is great. I love it. Obviously, it would also be interesting to start introducing some new topics. So when your name came across my desk and the wealth advisement that you do, and you have an engineering background, I thought, oh, this is perfect. This would be a great kind of segue into testing out some new types of content that engineers, I hope, will still find very interesting and relevant and useful, but deviates a little bit from the typical, very strictly engineering focused content that we've been producing for the last 7 years. So great. Here
Awesome.
we are, day of, we get to jump into this new topic that I think everyone is going to be interested in. I mean, who doesn't want more money, right? Who doesn't want to plan a little bit better with their personal finances for the future? And I think that's what you're going to help us with today. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And it's funny you bring that up. It is one thing I found very different from the engineering world to the finance world is, as an engineer, I worked on a very specific, part of a computer chip that, most people wouldn't even know what that was unless they worked in the industry. So when I'm at a party and I want to talk to someone about what I do, there's a very, very tiny percentage of the population that can talk with me. Whereas when I got into finance, now all of a sudden this is something that everyone deals with, right? So it's a
That's
very
right.
different thing just from that. Yeah.
That's right. Running a business, I mean, the podcast is not my business. It's a part of the business.
Hmm.
The real business is engineering services. We build automated equipment, machine design, fixtures, tooling, all those things. And 17 years now we've been in business. And obviously, I think a lot about the finances of the business.
Yeah.
And I've had a chance to think very deeply about this over the years. And it might seem, hindsight is 20/20, I guess, but I've come to this epiphany or realization, and probably 98% of the people out there who are all much smarter than me, including yourself, Stanley, are going to be like, yeah, duh, of course that's the case. But this realization that took me many years to come to was that the closer you are directly to the revenue, the more you can charge for your product or service. And so we're engineering services. We build these machines that then manufacture a widget that then the company sells for revenue. So we're at best one step removed from the widget that actually brings the revenue in, which means that in our customers, budgets, we're an expense. We're a line item expense that they want to minimize.
Right.
And as a result, sometimes we do okay and sometimes we don't. But if we can, this is something we're working on internally. If we can sell our own product, then we're no longer one step removed. We're
Yep.
directly associated with that revenue generating engine. Anyway, all that is to say that I think that money and wealth are very interesting topics, and I'm very eager to talk with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, tell us a little bit about your background. So you were an electrical engineer. You still, I mean, once an electrical engineer, always an electrical engineer. But
Yeah.
how did you make this transition into wealth advising?
Yeah, so I got my engineering degree in the late '90s, and so it was the peak of the tech bubble, and I was in New York, worked for IBM at the time, and everyone said if you were I did hardware design, I designed computer chips, and so everyone said if you were in hardware design, you had to be in Silicon Valley, and so I pick up, I was in my early 20s, pick up and went to California. That's when I started working for Agilent Technologies in 2000, and then 2002, I bought my first house in California, and I moved in on a Saturday. Sunday, sitting in my living room, just kind of patting myself on the back, how proud I was of buying my first house. Monday, I went to work and then got laid off. And so
Oh,
I was,
no.
yeah, yeah, 2 days after I'd moved into my new house. And
You're
so,
kidding.
yeah,
Oh,
so a financially
heartless.
stressful, yeah, yeah, financially
Jeez.
stressful time for me, of course, at the time, and I didn't know what to do. Of course, I just cash out my 401k to pay my mortgage, or do I sell the house I just bought? And I think the most frustrating thing was really that I didn't have anyone to go to for help. So I'd ask my parents; they said one thing, my colleagues said another, my friends said something else, and so just really frustrated, didn't know what to do. As I was looking for new engineering jobs at the time, I came across an ad for a financial advisor position at a large financial firm, and I thought, well, that might be interesting to do. Not only would I get to learn what to do for my own situation, but then I could also help other people that were in similar situations. This was 2002. Now the tech bubble had just burst. Lots of engineers are now getting laid off. And so, with the encouragement of my girlfriend at the time, who is my wife now, I went in for the interview, somehow got through a couple other interviews and got the offer. And I still remember driving home from that offer just thinking, oh, financial advisor, how hard could that be? And then the next 3 years of my life were the most miserable, miserable
Oh,
years of my life.
no.
Yeah,
How
mainly.
come?
Well, you're starting your own business, so it's all the difficulties of starting things up. It was 100% commission, so you're really not getting paid much because I didn't have a client base at the time. Um, it was working 60-hour weeks and just lots of pressure. The main thing, though, I think in hindsight, the thing that really stressed me out was back then we got all of our clients through cold calling, and that's as an engineer, I didn't know what cold calling really was. I thought you just read a script. How hard could it be? And yeah, that was just it's miserable.
It's
I
so hard, isn't it?
Yeah, I've in my whole life, I'd never had to face rejection like that, day in, day out, all the time. It was that had I known what I was going through, I don't think I would have done it.
Wow.
I said so. I'm
My
glad I
my
didn't know.
wife, my wife worked in a call center for just a few weeks back in college,
Okay.
and she recently reminded me of this story. We were talking about cold calling for some reason,
Uh-huh.
and she reminded me that when she was working in this call center, same thing you said, right? Just rejection, rejection, rejection. It's just constant, right?
Yeah.
And some people can be kind of mean, which
Yeah.
I get. You're kind of bothering them, whatever. Anyway, she started getting like seriously depressed, and she had to
Yeah.
quit because it was just so depressing taking all these and sometimes hurtful comments and just rejection. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a rough job.
Yeah, yeah. They will actually have a colleague, but that when I was doing that, he actually had to quit his. He started getting like pre-diabetic, and because of the stress,
Oh
I think it
boy.
was diabetic, and the
Wow.
doctor basically said you have to quit this job. And yeah, as soon as
Wow.
he quit, he got healthy again. So so yeah, it was a lot of pressure. It was tough. And it actually started affecting my health as well. Even my relationship. My wife at some point was actually starting to give my resume out behind my back to her engineer friends, hoping I'd go back to engineering because I was making her miserable. And
Oh no. So
but in
how did you get past that? You said a few
yeah,
years it was really, really tough. How was it, just time and getting used to it, or was there like a trigger
yeah,
that changed things?
a couple things. Yeah, one was just persistence, as with a lot of things. You just kind of keep grinding away as you start building up a client base. You don't have to cold call as much. I also proactively looked at just because I hated cold calling so much, looked at other ways to get clients, and so I was starting to do things like lunch and learns and little presentations and things. So I branched out to other ways of getting clients earlier than most others, just 'cause I hated that cold calling. But I think the big thing too, in 2006, I actually went independent and became an independent franchise owner of a large financial firm, which is where I am now. And then things started getting better there. I started, that was after 3 years. So I started getting my client base under me. I started just kind of getting my feet under me as well and understanding the business and how to run things. And then fast forward to today. Now, of course, it's wonderful. Now I love it. I can't imagine doing anything else. I have to pinch myself sometimes. I'm so blessed to be where I am. I look forward to going to work. I look forward to seeing my clients. It's emotionally gratifying. I get to help people reach their financial goals in retirement. I become a best-selling author now. I'm a go-to advisor for tech professionals. So it's just, I can't believe I am where I am now. It's just wonderful. And so in hindsight, getting laid off was the best thing that could have happened to me. But of course, it didn't feel like it at the time.
I intimately understand that statement. I had a very similar experience getting, a little bit. I mean, I had worked there for more than 2 days.
Yeah, right.
So
Okay,
that
yeah.
was good. But after a few years, I got laid off from where my first engineering job, and we had just bought a house and we had a mortgage and
Oh,
we had
okay.
a new baby, right? And
Oh,
so
yeah.
I spiraled into crisis mode. But just like you said, I went through a few years of like, this is really hard, starting a new business, figuring out all that stuff. And
Yep.
now, wow, I look back and what a great blessing that was. One of the best
Absolutely.
things that has ever happened to me. So you probably don't use your engineering skill set on a day-to-day basis for engineering, but I'm curious, how has that engineering background supported or informed the wealth management work that you do?
Yeah, a couple ways. One, certainly my approach to personal finance is very analytical and I guess engineering like. In the book, for instance, I break up personal finance into 7 key areas, and each chapter is essentially one of those areas. And so I kind of visualize it as like you're trying to fix a machine. So you have to take it apart. You have to look at each part, make sure each part's working correctly, fix everything up, and then you have to put it back together and make sure it's working. And so it's kind of a similar approach where I kind of break up finance into those 7 key areas. You want to address each of those areas. And then at the same time, you want to understand that even though you're looking at them in isolation, they all do work together, sort of like gears in a machine. And so when you put it back together, you have to understand how one thing affects another. And so, I think the approach is very engineer-like, and I think that's why I tend to attract the more analytic engineer clients because they like that approach, just because they're used to it. Um, I would say the other big thing about my engineering background is it actually helps almost more so run my business through the processes I have in place and systems. I have a pretty lean practice, is what we call in our industry. So I manage about 250 million in assets, and most firms, most practices that manage that amount usually have maybe 4 to 7 employees. I only have 2. I have another advisor and then a non-licensed staff, and we're working regular hours. We're not working nice weekends or anything. It's all great. So my practice runs very efficiently, essentially, and it's very process and systems oriented, very consistent. And I think that basically comes from my engineering background. And my wife, who also was an engineer, she used to be a process engineer, and so I think that probably has some influence on me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that engineers make some of the best business owners because
Yeah.
we're very logical and we're process oriented, and those are very important things when running a business. I know it's been that way for me for sure.
Yep.
So you talked about these 7 areas of focus in finance that you wrote about in your book. What are some of those areas?
Yeah, so those areas are the first is just evaluating your current financial position. The second is investment management. Third is protection planning. So that's looking at your insurance coverages, life insurance, disability, long-term care, home health, auto, umbrella, so forth. Fourth is workplace benefits. So evaluating how to use your workplace benefits efficiently. Fifth is tax planning. Sixth is retirement planning, and seventh is estate planning. And so those are the 7 key areas.
Got it. Okay. So you work a lot with engineers and technical professionals. Are there any mindsets that you've observed in engineers, these technical people that tend to hold them back? Like, is there any coaching that you find is necessary and you do for your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say one on the positive side, engineers and tech professionals, they tend to be pretty good savers, especially high income earners. I rarely come across a high income tech professional that doesn't save a lot of money, which is great. From a financial planning standpoint, that's wonderful. We love seeing that. And that's not true in a lot of other industries, right? I also have clients that are doctors, attorneys, business owners that make a ton of money, but they also spend a ton of money and constantly have to twist their arm just to get them to save a little more. But I rarely have that issue with engineers. So that's a great mindset to have. The one thing I do find generally with engineers, they do tend to be a little more aggressive with their investments. Now, sometimes that's intentional, but oftentimes it's not. A lot of times tech professionals don't really understand how much risk is in their portfolio until I point it out to them. And oftentimes this takes the form of individual stock, employer stock most of the time. So if it's a self-employed person or a person that works at a startup type of thing, it's sort of the stock and the options that they have at the startup. Or if it's an engineer that works at a big company like Google or Apple, then they have all these different ways they get paid through stock, restricted stock units and stock purchase plans, and they end up accumulating a bunch of stock and not realizing how risky that is, especially as they get close to retirement. And then the other, probably the big one, just sort of as a more general thing, when I tell people I work with engineers, most people think that engineers and analytical folks, because they're so logical, they tend to make very logical decisions and they don't make emotional decisions. And I've actually found the opposite is true. The more analytic they are, the more emotional decisions they make.
Interesting.
And so it's a counterintuitive. And the reason is, one of the things we learned early on in the financial career is people generally make decisions with their emotions and then they rationalize it with logic. And engineers are so good at rationalizing that they can convince themselves that they're really making the right decision, even though behind the scenes it's really an emotional one. And so I do spend a lot of time just trying to coach my engineer clients to try to get them off the emotional decisions and really do what's rational and logical. So that's a big one that I have to deal with a lot.
Well, hopefully people listening to this have some kind of advisor that they can work with, or maybe they want to reach out to you and work with you. And by the way, Stanley didn't pay anything to be on this. This is not a sponsored episode. I just thought it would be interesting content. So I'm not being paid to say this. But if they don't, and you mentioned how a lot of us engineers don't realize that we are rationalizing or making emotion-based decisions, how can we catch ourselves? How can, if we're blind to it, what are some ways that we can maybe more deeply evaluate some of these choices and figure out, oh yeah, I am making an emotion-based decision, not a logic-based decision?
Yeah, it is tough. I'd say the first is just awareness, just understanding that we all have human biases, we all have emotions, and no matter how analytic you are, we all make emotional decisions. I do as well. I'm human as well. So just awareness is I think of a movie, The Usual Suspects movie, one of my favorites when I was younger. I remember the one quote he said. Now I'm losing it. Yeah, hey, it'll come to me. The point is, you have to be aware. I got it. The greatest trick the devil ever played was to convince the world that he doesn't exist. Right. So that's emotions, right? If you're convinced that you don't make emotional decisions, then you are the one that's most susceptible to making them. And so first, it's just pure awareness, being aware that you make those decisions. I can go through a couple that I see that or rationale or biases that I see often with engineers. The first one, and this is not just engineers, this is with everyone, confirmation bias is probably the most common one that I see. If only it might just be the most noticeable. And confirmation bias is simply, you have a belief, and when you see something that supports your belief, you remember it and you see, I was right. When you see something that doesn't support your belief, you tend to ignore it or forget about it. And so that one is is we all have that. But if you're aware you have that, you can be a little more cognizant of it. The way I personally like to fight that is I'm always looking for things that go against what I believe. If you're constantly searching for the opposite thing, then that helps offset that confirmation bias. Another one that I often see is they call the disposition effect, and this is essentially just the tendency to want to hold on to things that have gone down, and we'd rather sell things that have gone up. And so a great example is if you and I had a house, the exact same house, we live right next to each other, it's the exact same house, same color, everything, and someone comes by and says they'll pay $1 million for this house, for either one of our houses. Now, let's say I bought it years ago for $500,000. You bought it recently for $1.1 million. And so if I sell it, I make $500,000. If you sell it, you lose $100,000, right? So which one of us is more likely to sell? I am, because, I made money on it. You kind of don't want to, because you're going to lose money. But in reality, from a rational standpoint, it shouldn't matter what you bought it at, right? The fact of the matter is, right now it's worth $1 million. That's what it's worth. That's what the person's willing to pay. It doesn't matter what price you bought it at, when you bought it, or so forth. That's just what it's worth now. And of course, this comes into play with stocks. People don't want to sell their stocks when it's down. I like to tell people the stock doesn't care what you bought it at. It's not going to go up or down in the future simply because you decided to buy it at some point in the past. And so what matters is what you think will happen moving forward with that stock, but what you bought it at should have no consideration as to whether you buy or sell it. So that's the disposition effect, and that often causes people to not let go of bad investments as they're going down because they don't want to sell it when it's at a loss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that related to the sunken cost fallacy? I've already
Yes.
put this money into it.
It's probably, yeah, I'm sure there's correlation, or I'm sure there's overlap there. A lot of these biases kind of have overlap with other things. So yeah, sunken cost fallacy sounds pretty much the same. It's the same idea. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Just kind of chasing good money with bad, or whatever they say. And then another one is the third one, I think, is regret aversion. I do face this a lot, and this is just the fact that making a decision and then having that be a mistake is more painful than not making a decision and having that be a mistake. And so, kind of same idea. We would rather hold on. If we have a stock that we know we should sell, and I see that a lot of my clients will be like, I know I should sell the stock, but I just can't get myself to do it, because they know as soon as they sell the stock, the price is going to go up, right?
Right.
But they would rather not sell the stock, even if they hold on to the stock and it goes down. That's less painful than selling the stock, making an actual decision, and then having that be wrong. And so that's regret aversion. And so that's one I see often too. People tend to not make decisions because they're afraid that something bad will happen.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
A few minutes ago, you had talked about stock options in companies, RSUs, right?
Yeah.
Restrictive stock options. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I bet a lot of tech professionals deal with that. And what are some of the, I don't know, maybe blind spots that engineers don't see when negotiating stocks? If there are any best practices that you have, both for negotiating them as well as for executing them, we'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. So restricted stock is probably the most common way people are getting paid these days, especially at the big tech companies. And for those that might not know, restricted stock is essentially it's like a bonus that's paid in stock instead of cash. And then usually you get it granted to you, and then it vests over the next 4 years or something like that. A fourth of it each year is when it vests. And so it's a very common way now to get paid. A lot of these big tech companies, especially, are starting to pay lower salaries, but then giving more restricted stock as bonuses and as a way to give them raises, so to speak. And so. And they're great. I mean, a bonus is a bonus, whether it's stock or cash. And so they're great. I think the issue that a lot of folks run into is, again, they tend to have a lot of stock in their own company, and they don't do it on purpose. It just kind of sneaks up on them, right? You start at a company, and they give you restricted stock, which is great, and they have a stock purchase plan oftentimes where you can buy stock at a discounted rate, and that's great to do as well. And so you do that, and so you start out, everything's great, but then you're working for 5, 10, 15, 20 years at this company. And if the company's done well, it's, in technology, it's probably skyrocketed. And now all of a sudden, half of your net worth or more is in this company stock, and you're about to retire. And that's way too much risk to have when you're about to retire. And so it sneaks up on you. Now, the problem I think most people have is once they're at that point, what do you do? Right? People don't want to sell it at that point. If you sell it and it's really high, well, now you have to pay all this capital gains tax, right? No one wants to pay the capital gains tax. But if it's down, then again, the same thing, disposition effect. If it's down, no one wants to sell it because it's down and it's going to come back up. And so, so there's never a good time emotionally to sell it. And so then they just hold on to it again, kind of status quo, again, that regret aversion. And then of course, at some point the market's going to crash and it hurts them. I've had, unfortunately, seen it firsthand several times. Someone just refusing to sell the stock, even though they know they should. They want to retire soon. The market crash, like 2008, happens, and then I had a client that had to put off retirement for 10 years because basically because they kept telling them that they have to sell their stock, and they had a real emotional tie to it. And they even admitted that, hey, we just can't, we just have an emotional tie to it. They had worked at this company their whole life, and they felt like they owed the company, and they felt like they were kind of betraying the company by selling the stock. And I told them, CEOs even sell their stock. It's not a betrayal of the company. It's just good finance, but unfortunately, and then bad timing. And so, so it really is important to address that risk, as painful as that might be. I think that one of the first things I try to train my clients is not to be afraid of capital gains tax. Capital gains tax means you've made money. In fact, I joke with them that you want to pay more capital gains tax than anyone else you know, because that means you've made more money than anyone else you know. And so, so don't be afraid to pay capital gains tax. If it makes sense to sell the stock, then just sell the stock and pay the tax. It's just like you don't want to make less money and earned income, right? You don't want a lower salary because you'll pay less taxes, right? No, you want a higher salary and pay more taxes. And so it's kind of the same idea. And there are some ways to defer capital gains, but when you defer it, you're just deferring. You're just putting it off till later, and then you're going to have an even bigger capital gain later. Assuming that investment keeps going up, and so that just makes it even more painful sometimes. I try to tell clients, don't be afraid of paying capital gains tax. It means you've made money. So let's see.
Are there any strategies to pay less capital gains tax? I mean, there's real estate, right? What's it called? The 1031 exchange or something like that.
Yep. Yeah. So there are that also is a way to defer capital gains.
Just defer it.
Yeah, but when you do that, you're still deferring it to later when you sell that second property. Assuming you don't keep doing the 1031s, then all of a sudden it is going, all of it then will be taxable. I would say there are a couple ways you can avoid capital gains tax, but most of them are not ideal to most people's goals. One, of course, is just don't make money, but of course that doesn't make any sense. You want to make money, so that's not.
I'll show you, Uncle Sam. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. The second one is if you die. If you die, then when that money gets inherited, there is the capital gains are essentially waived for the inheritor. So for the beneficiary. Yep. So and sometimes this can, you don't purposely die, but for clients that have more money, more assets, sometimes, we'll draw out their retirement plan and they need this much to retire. They have more than that. And so they have this extra money that they know is going to go to their heirs, that they know they're not going to ever need to touch. And if you're fortunate enough to be in that situation, then the tax deferral might make sense, because then you're just putting taxes off, put it tax as far as possible. And then when you die and your kids or whoever inherits the money, then all those capital gains are waived. So that's where tax deferral might make sense. And then the third one is charitable giving. So same idea. If you have something with a lot of capital gains and you give it to charity, then then no one has to pay those capital gains. And that does bring me to that's what some people will do. If let's say you do give regularly to a charity, your church or whatever community charity that you have, and you happen to have really high appreciated stock, you can actually donate the stock to charity instead of cash, and then you don't have to worry about the capital gain. So that is a very popular strategy to use if they're more charitably inclined. And then similarly, you can gift the stock to your kids. If you know this is money you're going to give to your kids anyways, instead of giving them cash, you can gift them the stock. Now, if you gift the kids the stock, the kids then have to pay the capital gains tax. But if they're in a lower tax bracket, especially if they're a young kid, and they're just starting out, or they're in college, then they're in a pretty low if 0% tax bracket. So that might work as well. So there are some ways to help mitigate the capital gains tax, but they are very specific to situations.
Got it. Okay. Let's go back to the topic of processes. You love processes. You're good at them. What are some financial processes that the regular Joe can implement into his or her financial planning?
Yeah, so I'd say at a high level, the two main things are you want to save, especially if you're younger, you're just starting out, you're not sure whether you should save or not. You should definitely save. For the younger folks, I like to show them, you can just do a really easy spreadsheet and show if you save $200 a month from ages 20 to 30, and then you just stop and never save again, you'll have $1 million at age 65, assuming 10% growth, all that stuff. And so if you wait until 30 and then you start saving, to get to that same point, not only do you have to save a lot more each month, but you have to save the entire time 35 years later to get to 65, just to get to that same point. So just saving in your 20s and 30s has a big determination as to how much money how much you save in your early years is a big determinant of how much money you end up when you're older. And so I always encourage the younger folks to, even if it's just $50 a month, to put away whatever you can. It really makes a difference in those younger years. And then saving, of course, the more automatic you can make it, the better. So 401k savings is great because it just comes out of your paycheck. You don't even realize it. If you're contributing to IRAs, just have it automatically, X amount per month come out of your checking account. So you don't have to worry about it. The whole personal finance strategy of pay yourself first. If you say, oh yeah, I'll just save whatever is left over at the end of the month, there's never going to be anything left over at the end of the month. And so automatic savings is a really good sort of system to employ, especially when you're younger. The other one, and this applies to anyone, is to regularly just have a system to regularly look over your finances once a year, maybe. So again, kind of like a machine, like a car, right? You don't just you have a great car and then just drive it for 60 years. You have to maintain it. You got to change the oil. You got to run tests, rotate the tires, and you need to do the same thing with your finances. What most people do is they make their decisions when they're kind of triggered to, right? When they start the job, oh, I have to figure out how much to put in my 401k and what to invest in, and then they never look at it again. And those type of things you do have to look at regularly. You have to rebalance. You have to adjust the amount you're putting in based on new tax laws or based on your income changing or your situation changing. And so just having a system in place, whether it's just an annual meeting with your spouse, maybe. I have a colleague who's a financial advisor as well, and he actually has an annual meeting with his spouse. They make it a big thing. They broke open a nice bottle of wine every year, and they just start going at their finances. And so whatever it takes, it is important to regularly review your finances. And if a lot of people working with a financial advisor is the best way to do it, because that kind of holds them accountable, and hopefully if it's a good advisor, they'll review their finances regularly, if you're not disciplined enough to do it yourself. But that, I think at a high level, just kind of monitoring the situation is really important. And then setting up things automatically. I know there's a strategy a lot of tech people use in our industry called the mega backdoor Roth. And so this is using the after-tax 401k. So I'm not sure how familiar your audience might be with this. With the 401k, most people know that you can contribute pre-tax and Roth into the 401k. That's what they call an elective deferral. You can contribute this year, 2026. It's like 24,500. You can contribute a little bit more if you're over 50. But on top of that, at many companies, you can actually contribute above and beyond that, which what they call after-tax 401k. And the it's not a set dollar limit. It's kind of a little more complicated equation they use to how much you can put in there, but it's usually around $20,000 to $30,000 more a year that you can put in. And then you can take this after-tax 401k and you can convert it to a Roth IRA. And so that's what they call a mega backdoor Roth. It essentially, if it's done correctly, it allows you to get $20,000 to $30,000 a year more into a tax-free position like the Roth IRA, where the money comes out completely tax-free when you take it out.
You call this a mega backdoor Roth IRA?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so
I'm
it's
gonna
kind
have
of
to look into this.
Yeah. It's a silly name, but I don't know how it got caught up. But yeah.
I've never heard of this. Interesting.
Yeah, it's basically taking after-tax 401k, contributing to the after-tax 401k, which again is above and beyond your pre-tax and Roth, and then converting it to Roth. Either Roth IRA or Roth 401k. You can usually do either. Both tax-wise is the same. And so it's especially with high-income engineers, they have trouble getting money into that tax-free position because they make too much to contribute to a Roth directly. There are rules how much you can make in contributing to Roth. And then they don't want to do Roth in their 401k because every dollar that goes into Roth is a dollar you can't put into the pre-tax. And so, and especially if you're a higher income earner, you probably want the pre-tax to get that tax deduction. And so this is a way for high income earners to get money into the Roth position, even though they have high income. And a lot of folks have it available and they don't realize it's there. That strategy's there. And so that's when I see a lot of times missed by high tech professionals. So yeah, go ahead.
Just commenting what amazing systems we have in place, these financial vehicles, right? I'm thinking, I don't even know when they started, 100 years ago, many hundreds of years ago, before any of this existed, right? Roth IRAs, 401ks, all of these financial investment vehicles. Like how did we as a society even come up with the idea that, hey, if we put together this financial vehicle and people contribute to it and it's used, honestly, I don't even know where it gets used, but it's going to come back a lot more than they put in, right? You're going to put in $1 and it's going to come back $1.50 a year later. Like, how did we even come up with that idea that we are able to conceptualize and then turn into this reality? It's kind of mind-blowing to me. Like, who's the one that first came up with that thought and made it work?
Yeah. So I'm actually reading a book right now called The History of Money by...
Of course you are. Yes.
I can't remember the name of the author. It's very interesting though, and it actually talks about through our history from the Roman Empire days, and I'm I think half or three-quarters of the way through now, but it's very interesting just kind of how money became money essentially, and then lending and borrowing and investing and all that stuff. From the tax code standpoint, the reason why we have all these different like strategies where and it is kind of they call it backdoor, right? It's kind of a backdoor thing, right? You're not really contributing directly to Roth. You're contributing through an after-tax 401k, and then you're converting it to a Roth. And so the reason they have those complications is just because the way the IRS code works is they never simplify anything. They just add on. Every year they change the code. They just add things on. And so thousands of pages later, right, there are always going to be all these loopholes and rules and things just because it just gets more and more complicated.
Wow. What an asinine way to do things.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. I would add with that after tax, just for your listeners who might be interested, there's if you work at a big tech company, again, like Google, Apple, Amazon, Nvidia, those four, all of those big companies do offer after tax 401k. Some companies don't. So if your company may not offer it, but every big tech company I've run into, they do offer that after tax. And then the other way you can do it is if you're self-employed and you have an individual 401k, then you should also be able to do that after tax. The folks that might have some issues is if you work for a small company or you're self-employed but you have a bunch of employees, just because there are some they call them top-heavy rules, and so every employee has to be contributing a certain amount in order for you to contribute a certain amount. And so you might have some difficulties doing the after tax in that situation, but otherwise, it is a wonderful way to get tax-free money in retirement.
Yeah. So these are all, pretty traditional
Mhm.
investment vehicles. Are there any less traditional strategies that you can share with us?
Less traditional. Yeah, actually, yeah, I would say the 401k strategy is pretty traditional. This after tax to Roth actually didn't really become available or popular until some more recent years, maybe the last 10 years or so. So
Okay.
that one is. The other one is something that's become a little more available to folks is a HSA, a health savings account.
Oh, yes.
And so now this again isn't for everybody. You do have to have a high deductible health plan in order to contribute to a health savings account. But if you can contribute to the health savings account, it is also a wonderful retirement account. So we encourage clients that have this account, don't think of it as a health account. Think of it as a retirement account. Um,
Oh, interesting.
and so, yeah, and because from a tax standpoint, it's the best of everything, right? A Roth IRA, you don't get a deduction for putting money in, but you actually get money, you get tax-free coming out. A regular pre-tax 401k, you get a deduction putting it in, but then it will be tax coming out, right? So the IRS is going to get their hands on it on one way or another. The HSA is the one time the IRS can never touch it. It's pre-tax going in, it grows tax deferred, and then it comes out completely tax-free. So the IRS never sees it. So from a tax standpoint, it's an amazing vehicle. And so we don't recommend using it like a regular health plan. Like most people are used to the flex spending accounts, the FSAs that have been around a long time. And those were use it or lose it, right? So I remember we would put money in FSA, and we have money, in November and December. We have to go to the convenience store and buy aspirin or first aid kits or whatever to use up the money. Otherwise, you're going to lose it. The HSA is not use it or lose it, right? So it's your account and you can keep it indefinitely. And so instead of using it, we actually recommend keeping the money in there and just letting it grow. Invest it and let it grow and really take advantage of the tax-free characteristics of it. So don't use them. So max it out, but don't actually use it for your medical copay or your aspirin or prescriptions. Pay that out of pocket. But at the same time, we also recommend saving the receipts. Even though you're not using the HSA, one thing you can also do is when you're in retirement, one of the features of the HSA is you can reimburse yourself completely tax-free from the HSA for any medical expenses since the HSA started. And so let's say you have $10,000 of expenses over the last 20 years that you've saved receipts for. You can literally just say, oh, I'm going to take out 10,000 from the HSA and reimburse myself all that for all those receipts back then, and then use it for whatever
Really?
you want. So
That
yeah,
is
so we do recommend
fascinating.
keeping the receipts, but yeah, so that's a more recent development, but that definitely one that I think a lot of people miss. Most people still use the HSA just as the flex spending account. And they try to use it all by the end of the year.
Um, uh, Shoot, I had a thought and I just lost it. So we're talking about, oh yeah, the HSA. I didn't even realize that money compounds in an HSA. I thought you just put it in there and nothing happens. It just stays there, but there's no like interest or anything like
Yeah,
that. But that's
so
not the case.
I think the default is it just goes to cash, and so usually is not making much, maybe a little bit of interest. But yeah, most HSAs now you can invest kind of like a 401k. You can invest in like a target date
Oh,
fund or whatever, and yeah, so you can have it grow.
wow. Tax free going in and tax free coming out.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. The best of both
Amazing.
worlds. Yep.
Amazing. Okay. All right. Well, Stanley, I think we'll start wrapping it up here.
Yeah,
Maybe one more question to end with.
sure.
So you have this in the beginning, it was really difficult, right? First few years, kind of starting your own business and working through cold calling and things like that. But you successfully ultimately made this transition. Any advice that you would give to engineers who might be listening to this, thinking to themselves, I'm interested in a career change myself that maybe takes me out of engineering into something else, but well, the sunken cost fallacy, right? I've put all this time and effort into being an engineer. I can't just throw that away.
Yeah.
What advice or feedback might you share?
Yeah. I would say actually I think that is a good thought in that you don't want to waste your background. because starting over completely is really difficult. You have nothing to give. You have nothing to offer, right? You have no experience. You have no education in whatever new thing you're doing, presumably, and so it's really hard to get off the ground just starting over. Usually, especially if you're older. When I did this, my career change, I was in my 20s. I didn't have any kids. I had lots of energy. I don't think I could have done that today. I'm turning 51 this year. So, I do recommend, if possible, somehow leveraging your background in whatever it is you do. Most careers and most things, you can leverage two different things into one. I talk, my oldest child is in college now. She's a freshman in college, and she's studying physics. But she's very musical. She's very talented with music and art, and she wants to minor in something like that. And I said, yeah, you can absolutely do that. You can, with physics, maybe we were at a symphony hall once, and they had these weird shaped things hanging from the ceiling, and that's for the acoustics. And so you can design those type of things if you're really good at physics, right? And you understand music. You could design instruments. There's all different things you could do. I had another one. My youngest was more interested in computer science, and we have a friend a friend of a friend who was helped develop a golem in Lord of the Rings, right? And he had an art degree, and he was a computer scientist. You kind of put those two together, and there you go. And so you can almost always find a way to kind of mix two seemingly unrelated things together. And myself, I went into finances in many ways completely the opposite of engineering, but I somehow found a way to kind of bring those things together to be in the career I am now. And so I do think it really helps to leverage your background in one way or another, just to help get you off the ground with that business. Like for me, if I were to go back and tell myself, my younger self, to do something different, that's what I would have taught him, because I didn't specialize in engineering until a little bit later, until I realized one day, I don't know, maybe 8-10 years into my career, that, I have a lot of engineers as clients. Maybe this is something I should pay attention to. But if I could go back and do it again, I would have started from day one and just specialize in working with engineers, because that's what I know, that's who I am, and that's who I would attract. So yeah, I would say that the advice would be to try to leverage your background however you can into the new career, and find a way to do that.
Yeah, wonderful advice, very practical. All right. Well, Stanley, thank you so much for being on the show today. I learned a few things that I'm going to go off and talk with my financial advisor about.
Awesome.
How can people get a hold of you?
Yeah. So I do have a website for my book. It's engineeringyourfinancesbook.com. They can get a free soft copy of the book, either PDF or a flipbook version. There's also a free audio version of the book. So feel free to visit the site and get the book there. They can get the book on Amazon as well if they want a physical copy. It's only like $4 or $5. I just made it the cheapest possible, as well as a Kindle version if they prefer that. And then if they want to reach out to me, you just reach me at stan@engineeringyourfinancesbook.com. Happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Terrific. All right. Well, Stanley, thank you so much again for being with us today. Really appreciate you sharing all of this.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. I had a lot of fun.
I'm Aaron Moncur, founder of Pipeline Design and Engineering. If you liked what you heard today, please share the episode. To learn how your team can leverage our team's expertise developing advanced manufacturing processes, automated machines, and custom fixtures, complemented with product design and R&D services, visit us at teampipeline.us. To join a vibrant community of engineers online, visit thewave.engineer. Thank you for listening.